Welcome to another episode of the Royal Corner. I am so excited that I have you here because we're going to have a very amazing conversation today. I've got Tumi Phake as my guest today. He's an entrepreneur, CEO, and founder of the Zenzele Group, and he won an award in 2017 for SME Entrepreneur of the Year. So I'm super excited to delve a little bit more into his journey and really to understand what it takes to succeed in entrepreneurship and some of the challenges that he's encountered on the way. Tumi, welcome, and thank you so much for making time to come and chat to us today.
Thank you. It's a wonderful day and it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome.
Yes.
I'm so excited. Now, obviously, my guests, I've got a wide range of guests or audiences rather, and they come from different backgrounds. So a lot of people may not know who you are. So I think just to start off, if you can just give us an intro of who Dumi Phake is and what you're about, what you're passionate about, and where you are in your journey.
No, fantastic. Yes, like you said, my name is Dumi Phake. I'm the founder and CEO of Zenzele Group. It's a business that's been, around for over 10 years. Actually, before that, I was in the corporate world like yourself. So I was in banking and I wanted to take the leap of faith to become an entrepreneur. One of the first businesses within Zenzele Group is Zenzele Fitness, and it's a corporate fitness and wellness company. So essentially what we do is we actually provide wellness services for, publicly listed companies, the large corporates in South Africa, where we provide a wellness program from basically setting up a wellness center, having the operations, supplying equipment, supplying wellness services, biokineticists, nurses and all of that. And it's sort of a full turnkey for companies. So the whole idea was to provide a wellness service for employees because, as you understand, you being in corporate, that is also important to ensure that companies and its employees are healthy, are well, they are productive, because businesses are understanding that, it's not just about profit for the business, but you actually make sure that your soldiers are healthy, are well trained. Mental health is an issue. And so we've been doing that with large corporations. And we also then, span into the commercial space where we actually built gyms, just like your Virgin Planet Fitness. We actually have a project coming up this year. So we're quite excited. We have a clothing company. We're in the tech space where we actually provide wellness services through the digital space because, with COVID, things have changed. It's not just the physical stuff, but it's how you actually have the touch, the digital touch points. We've got Zen Cafe, which is a sort of a wellness cafe where we provide healthy food. So we're also excited about that. And yeah, we've been in that space. And I think, my journey when I started as an entrepreneur, it was just an idea like anyone else where it's something that I wanted to do. And I was fortunate enough that through that idea, without the experience, I was able to initially raise 5 million to actually start it up because, it's capital intensive. You have to buy equipment, you have to sort of, business development, etc. So it wasn't easy, but fortunately, like as I said, 10 years later, we are operating. We've also survived COVID and all of these things. So yeah, it's quite an interesting times in South Africa. So yeah, that's in a nutshell my story.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, you've said a whole lot of things. It's been a mouthful, very interesting things. I'm interested in knowing at the very beginning when you decided to take that leap, because you mentioned that you used to be in corporate yourself. How did you take that leap and how did you know exactly which industry to go into? Was it something, wellness and fitness, something that you had always been interested in, or is it where you identified an opportunity? Because I think a lot of us who are also in corporate are sitting with ideas, and sometimes those ideas are just ideas. We don't execute on them and we are afraid to take the leap. So
Yes.
what was that journey for you? What pushed you to take the leap?
Yes. Yeah, I think, first and foremost, I think I am an entrepreneur in blood, and I suppose maybe I owe it to my grandparents.
Yeah.
My grandfather and grandmother, they had no formal education. I think at the time it's standard 3, and they, in the township standard they had built, really great businesses from nothing, and especially during the apartheid times where every red tape, all the odds against you to succeed, because you obviously, put it in a township, in an isolated, segregated space where you're not supposed to actually be, self-funding, self-sufficient or independent. And so it was quite incredible that even through those times they were able to actually really like have meaningful success in that standard, with what they had. And I'm sure that if they were put in environments that would have allowed them to thrive, they would be billionaires, because they just. So with that being said, I think that it doesn't, people that have it in them, it doesn't matter what situation they are put in, because I'm obviously fortunate to make an example about my grandparents who were put in a situation where they were not allowed to succeed.
Yeah.
Because of apartheid and all of that, but they still managed to do it. So I think all of us have that in us, the resilience to overcome certain things. And with me and businesses, it's something that I, working for corporate wasn't really something that I saw myself like
doing for
retiring, and there's a place for people to have that. So
Yeah.
there's absolutely nothing wrong. I just think for me, I just saw that it's just not a place where I can see myself and I'm retiring and I'm working for an organization for 30 years. And yes, fitness, wellness is something that I'm interested in, but there's also many other things. So this is not just the box of like, I'm an entrepreneur because of the fitness. I like the business side of things, and, even the business that I was, I did not have experience, and yet I was able to incorporate 100 years worth of experience because I was able to identify the right teams, the right people to be able to help to execute what I'm doing. Even to this day, I'm a student. You can never be a master of everything. So for me in business is to find people who are smarter than you, who have the experience, who can actually help to succeed. And that's what I've always driven. And so in all the industries that I get into, at times it's not because I'm an expert in those industries, but it's because I'm able to sort of to create a vision that people can buy into and say, you know what, we will want to jump into this. This looks like it's going somewhere. And obviously, you learn how to execute certain things. So one of the things that intimidates people is that they think, okay, well, I have no experience, I don't know where to start, etc. But everybody started something at some point, not know how to start it.
Yeah.
But everybody started somewhere. So if you have, the guts and the confidence to actually do it, and speak to the right people, get the right team, it's very possible. And that's what it was. For me, it was literally, a bit of it was by chance.
Yeah. You're at the right place at the right time.
To be honest, I think, and preparation, and when the chance comes and the opportunities, even with the funding, getting 5 million, where I have no track record, there's no financials to prove it, there's nothing. And they literally just, I sold the dream. And, fortunately it worked. And it can happen to anybody. So I just think, because the only thing I can say the difference was, I was on that for many years. So when the opportunity came, it just looked like this guy knows what he's talking about. He's just ready.
Wow.
And that's all it was. Yeah.
Geez, that's incredible. Being able to secure 5 million of funding
Yeah, imagine like
without a track record necessarily.
Nothing. Just that's the pay slip that I worked for a certain corporate.
And you highlight in the conversation a lot about, the people that you bring on board onto your team.
Yes.
So did that have you being able to secure that funding? Was it influenced also largely by that you've got the right people in terms of the respective project that you were working on at the time? So it made it easier for the funders to be able to grant you the money?
Absolutely. It was actually a combination. I think on both sides, having to sell the idea to the people that have experience to say, hey, if you guys come on board, I will secure, X amount of investment and we can get this going on. Because what is in it for them? And also with the funders, it's like, well, they have a mandate to deploy the money. So they need to spend the money. Yeah. So they need to spend money to entrepreneurs, because it also speaks about, also matching the right funding for yourself. If I went to a normal bank, they would have told me, they would have shut the door.
Yeah, get out of here.
Because I'm speaking to the wrong people.
Yes.
So I understood the mandate, and also how I sold it to the funders and investors, or the investment committee was like, look, I have a team that has been doing this for so long. And now we're wanting to structure this new business that is going to, there's a value proposition, there's a market, so that there is a a potential customer that's willing to buy this product, and all of these things that were sold to different stakeholders, because and answering the questions that if it's experience, the question is answered. If it's funding, I can answer that question. If it's execution, I can answer that. The supply chain, operational excellence and execution, all of those things. So that's literally what I had to put in. And you realize that most of those things, you can't even, a business plan, no one looks at a business plan.
Yeah.
People look at the financials and the value proposition. I haven't written a business plan, ever since. And it's nice to sort of help with just a roadmap, but when it comes down to the real deal, it's all about execution, the team, what can be done to make this work, and does it make money? What is the ROI on it? And I, like I said, also it was like, I think it was just the right place, right time, and I took advantage of the opportunity.
Wow.
Seizing the moment, yeah.
So you really acted swiftly. You didn't sleep on
I
it.
did. I think so.
That's incredible.
I think maybe my grandmother and grandfather were also there in those negotiations.
Yeah.
Bringing in the experiences.
The expertise.
Yeah, and God too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a bit of that.
Yeah. That's so amazing. I think they always say entrepreneurship is not for everyone. And I think the more we engage in such conversations, you get to learn different things, different nuggets. And I guess sometimes, you find people who ventured out into entrepreneurship, and then they come across whatever challenges and end up going back to the corporate world or whatever the case is. So in your case, what are some of the challenges that you have encountered along the journey? I know you highlighted that during COVID.
Yes.
You survived COVID, which is incredible because many businesses have gone under, even businesses that had been running for many, many years.
Great businesses.
Yeah. How did you survive?
Yeah. I think, there's a combination of this. And I think it's a little bit... I think a lot of things that we do in one sphere in life applies to all.
Yeah.
Even in your personal life, personal life, we can talk about marriage. What takes or what makes a good marriage. What makes a good marriage. It's a discipline. It's the choosing to be in the marriage every day and to love that person. It's the courage, it's the learning, it's the working as a team. There's all of that, and that's what happens in business, because also that involves human beings. So what makes a successful business is also the team that you have. A lot of the times, great businesses with brilliant ideas, one of the reasons why they fall apart is you'll find that the management or the team was just not the right match, and you'll find that some businesses with no money but they have the right team, and they're just able to just excel. So there's a combination of everything. And I think that, what it takes is you just need to really want it. You read stories of really great people. I mean, Nelson Mandela, and also great stories that we've heard around the world. And what makes them, or why do we celebrate those people like we do? And you understand that the amount of adversity that they went through, that most normal people would not be willing to take that. Most normal people would not be willing to go to prison for 27 years or 20 years or however long he was.
Yeah.
But because he did it, it makes him so great at everything that comes after that. And I think entrepreneurship is also a bit like that, because I've seen people that are really smart, highly intelligent people. But for them to be business people, it just wasn't enough, because it's not just about the intellect. It's about, you need to be able to handle pressure. Sure. Then the amount of stress that, 1 minute you're on just like the sky is the limit, and the next it's not. And so the amount of stress and how you handle pressure is a skill on its own. And so that's why sometimes you find that sometimes people who are too smart, they will actually try to they think too much.
Yeah.
And all they think about is how bad or why this will never work.
Yeah.
And again, we've seen time and again where things that were told that they would not work, and yet they do. And there's always that thing, that the person has to say, even with all of that, I was willing. So you really need to want to have it. And it's definitely not about the money. If you are in it because you want to be rich and you want to make money, unfortunately, money is a byproduct of everything. But your focus cannot, you can't go into business because you are thinking about the dollars and the money. Because when you don't make it, you will quickly want to quit.
Exit.
Quickly. And so these are all the sort of soft skills that one has to understand, and obviously over experience, creating strategy, a proper strategy around identifying your weakness, and also finding a team that can complement that with strength. And also hard work. I've realized hard work also doesn't pay off. We've always have been taught or understood that hard work is what makes you successful.
Yeah.
But how many people do you know who wake up 5 a.m. every day, who've worked so hard in their lives for 30 years,
Sure.
and yet they still are not, they're nowhere. So hard work is not the answer. Smart work is. Yes, when you start, you need to work hard, but smart work, because you can work hard to nowhere.
Yeah.
You're working hard, but hard, I could be running a treadmill until I get a heart attack.
Yeah.
Because I just, so smart working and operating in a smart way is what will get you. Because sometimes smart working, what would have taken you 30 years to do can take you 5 years.
Yeah.
So for example, when I got into this business, some of the things I knew that I don't want to learn and get experience that will need me 10 years to learn it. So let me go find someone that already has experience to incorporate into the team. And yes, do I need to pay that person, more? Of course. Is it okay if that person earns more than me in the business, even though I hired them? Of course, because the value that they'll bring to the business is supersedes what the returns of that company can get to.
Yeah.
And so that's just sort of smart thinking, because sometimes entrepreneurs, you also want to do everything by yourself. It's impossible. It's impossible to be an accountant, to be an operating person,
Sales.
the marketing, sales, HR. It's just not, you can't.
Yeah.
You have to thrive to find a great team to do things for you. And so that you can focus on the business, not in the business, but on the business. Getting new clients, getting, new opportunities, new investment. That's what you should be focusing on. So sometimes we end up finding ourselves in a rat race where we are just doing the day-to-day and, operations, and you're spending too much time trying to fix the issues in the company. And therefore you actually neglect growing the business. And that's why sometimes we stay small as a business, because our focus is, once we get one client, we are focusing on just trying to, and we're not growing and growing. Sure. And so, and obviously some of that comes with experience and time, you realize, and all of that, but it's impossible to do it alone.
Everything alone.
Yeah.
It's so interesting that you share that, because I think it's part of, especially when you highlight the fact that, it's some business people, or sometimes along the journey somewhere, you find it difficult to almost delegate, let's call it that, right? Yes. To hand over the baton to somebody else to handle that respective component of the business. Now, I know that sometimes, especially when you're starting out in the journey, you've got this idea and there's a tendency to want to keep it as this little baby. You want to nurture the baby. And it's quite a scary thing to invite other people to come on board, because I think sometimes you stand the risk of, diluting whatever it is that you'd initially started out to be, or somebody not necessarily getting it in the way that you have. You have this vision, and perhaps it's a function of not being able to articulate it well enough to the next person, or them just receiving it well enough. But what is your advice for those people that have recently ventured out into business and really need to get to a point where they're growing their business and need to let go a little bit, how do you suggest that they practically go on that journey of being able to hand over to somebody else? So let me put it a small example. So in companies, you'll have sometimes an internship, for example. You'll bring interns on board so that they can come and spend a year with you.
Yes.
And then after that year, you see if they are ready for the role or not.
Yes.
If they're ready to become permanent employees.
Then you take them on, yeah.
Yes. So in business, how do you suggest practically for somebody to be able to, who's still trying to nurture this baby of theirs and does want to grow,
Yes.
but being able to let go of certain parts of the business for somebody else to do?
Yes. No, absolutely. And I obviously say this respectively because it is not easy. I think especially, you've bootstrapped and you've put your last savings into this. And, suddenly you don't want to just give it to anybody. So I know psychologically it can be very challenging. So one has to assess that, does it bring value to the organization? Because a lot of the times the founder in itself is the bottleneck. A lot of the times the person who's actually pulling the business down is the owner of the business. In fact, many times it's the owner and not the people. And so one is also understanding where you are and what your strength. And so sometimes as a founder, we tend to want to take positions of leadership. And maybe perhaps that's not our strength. And maybe your strength is just sales, just selling these things. But when it comes to running the businesses, you're actually terrible. You don't even know how to read a balance sheet or an income statement, which is okay. So what I'm saying is that is okay. So, and I think that great leadership is people recognizing that actually I'm not the right person. I'm the founder, I'm the shareholder of this business, but I'm actually not the right person to be running this business. It's the same thing as someone being a chef and they want to open a restaurant. And you're a very good cook, but when it comes to running the restaurant as a business, you are terrible. You don't even know how to run customer service. You just don't know the systems in place and every, the operational excellence, that has to happen from someone walking in there to actually, the place smelling good, the menu and how, the food has to be ready and all of that. All you know is cooking and making good food. And suddenly now you want to be in the front and at the back. And at times then you find where the problem starts happening, where now when the founder has been told to say, just stay in the kitchen. No, this is my business. Well, I'm going to be in the kitchen. And it's like, no, you are good at just being in the kitchen. And those who are mature enough to realize that maybe I'm good just being in the kitchen, that's the first start. Actually, without actually looking at other people. Because I think that when you're able to identify your strength, then you realize, okay, I'm actually not really good at this. I actually need to find someone who's a manager of this business. I need to find an accountant. I need to find this. I'm actually not good at sales. I'm terrified of selling. But I know I can make a good product because I've got the technical skills to bake this cake, or to make this the best steak in the world. That I can do. But I don't know how to package it together or how to even sell it or even price it. That's just not my strength. And so by doing that, you'll find that, the conscious leaders who are able to see that first, looking at themselves, they'll tend to then lead from the back. And sometimes you don't even see them in the business because they're just like, I'm just not that great in all of that. In fact, maybe sometimes your face being in the business scares people off. Just don't be there.
Back off.
Just back off. But find most of us, we want to be in the front. We want to show that we are
hands-on,
the owners, and we are in control. And sometimes it's a bad idea. So that's the first thing. And the second one is, you'll find situations where there has to be sort of trade-off exchange in terms of, sometimes you want to attract talent and you may not have the funds at the time. And so in exchange to that, what can you exchange? And sometimes you have to, give equity. You have to, give up some equity in your business so that you can attract someone to say, look, if you stick around and this thing turns around, there's a piece of the pie for you. But and so we at times then we tend it's also very difficult because for me my question is, would you rather have 100% of nothing or have 1% of a billion?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you look at some of the biggest businesses and founders, most of them actually are they minority shareholders.
Yeah.
The individuals, I mean, they don't even own most of the majority of the company at this stage. But they own, 1% or 2% of what? Of billions, rather than you owning 100%
Nothing.
of 10,000. So you have to really think about that. And I think that there's a psychological warfare and learning that one needs to have to understand these things. And hence why those who get the game, who understand the game, they do it so successfully. And that's why you get these guys who are billionaires in their companies,
Yeah.
and yet they own 2% of the company. But they are the richest somebody and so successful, but they don't actually even have control, because at that point it's not really about control, it's about value.
Yeah.
Because you're controlling what actually. I'd rather control 2% of a big pie than 100% of nothing.
Yeah. Listen, it sounds like I'm ready for my stake in the Zenzele group. Stake of equity. I'm here.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, it's all baby steps.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, there was obviously a time so I say this, as I said, respectfully, that it's learning and understanding, like, oh, wow, actually, no, you need to relax about trying to hold on to too much. In fact, sometimes, there's a question of, there are some of the businesses that I'm starting or that I'm running, I don't even want, it's the part of the strategy is not to have them on for too long. So part of them is to grow them and to sell. So the intention is also not to keep these businesses forever, but is to actually grow them in value, that you attract someone that can actually buy into the business, so that you can actually then invest in something else.
Yeah.
And that's also smart thinking, because with the volatility of markets and the business, is that sometimes it's not a good idea by yourself to keep a business by yourself for 20, 30 years. And sometimes it's the right time to say, okay, this is a perfect time to sell, because the business just looks amazing. And now I need to attract, a massive investment, so that I can get another partner that can actually take this thing from here to there. Because maybe my ability is to grow it from here to there. And from there, I'm stuck. And I need someone to come in and grow it to there. And then again and again and again.
Yeah.
And that's where it is that sometimes actually holding on to a business for too long is actually a bad idea.
Wow.
Sometimes grow a business just to sell it.
Yeah.
And that's how you actually become successful. And you don't necessarily become successful because the business was profitable. You actually became successful because you sold the business
At the right time.
at the right time,
Yeah.
at the right value.
Wow.
And that's how you actually become successful, because of that. So yeah.
That's a very refreshing take. And I'm curious to find out, how do you stay true to the journey? So knowing that, okay, you've got the awareness, right? That the business, at some point, you grow it to whatever business you are grooming at that point in time. It might mean that you have to sell it off to somebody else. Now, as you're going along the journey, when you're still in the journey, what are some of the practices that you have, or the things that you expose yourself to make sure that, one, you stay true to the journey itself and yourself, but also to be able to have almost a sounding board to say, look, I'm in the business, I am in it right now, I'm busy doing this with it, but am I on track?
Yeah.
So do you have people like that you are able to sound off your ideas on, or bounce off your ideas on?
Yeah, absolutely. In
Yeah.
fact, thank you for that. That is probably the most important thing that you can have as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. It's the amount of knowledge that you invest yourself in. And I think that for me, I'm all for education. Education is so key, and whether it's education formally or informally, either way, education is important. And so, because education is what helps the critical thinking, the problem solving, and that's where I'm supportive of education. Say, educate yourself. So you can educate yourself by enrolling yourself for a qualification. You can educate yourself by getting yourself a mentor. You can educate yourself by having a advisory board. One of the things is I was involved in a lot of strategic training that I was part of. One of the nice things that I did through this journey, well, not that I did, but I was afforded the opportunity was, the Obama program where I went to the US and studied in the US through the Obama leadership program. And, meeting different businesses and entrepreneurs and also just understanding different ways on how people are doing things. It was just incredible. Also investing in, strategic programs. There's a really great program that I was part of, a very extensive program around strategy, execution, the pillars of business, what does it take, the disciplines of business and what it takes and what are the sort of things that you need to tick to really create, a high growth business. And so those things, if you're not even aware of those things, the chances of you succeeding are in that space are quite low, because there's a whole matrix and there's a whole discipline around that. It's just like with exercise. If you want to be fit or healthy, there are certain things that you need to do to actually achieve that. You need to eat properly. You need to take the right calories. You need to, have the right water intake. There's specific things that one needs to do to achieve certain things. And that is also applies in business. It's not just by luck. There has to be a discipline that one needs to apply in order for them to get to that success.
Yeah.
And your operational excellence, your finance has to be, your sales, your marketing, and there's specific disciplines that you need to touch on that really needs for you to actually do well. And you will slowly start to find that could even help you to identify that maybe this is not a great business because I've actually done all of these things. So it's not necessarily that I'm a bad entrepreneur. It's just that I'm actually not in the right business. And the same principles could be applied where you're actually now in a different opportunity and you do really well. So it's all these learnings that there's certain disciplines. And I think that once you get there, I said the mentors, the constantly educating yourself formally or informally to really understand where do you fit and seeing opportunities is very important, because you could find yourself just, stuck in no man's land and feeling like you're not moving around. And hence why a lot of times you see that, mental health issues, depression and all of that with entrepreneurs is actually something that is not really spoken about, but it's actually something that's very high there, because it can be a very lonely place where you're trying to figure out certain things and, things not working out and people not understanding what's going on and whatever. So there's a lot of those things that one has to really place a focus on. And blessed to those who just figure it out instantly. But there are some, you have to learn along the way and really try. And that's why you hear stories of people before they really become successful. You'll find, people that they went through bankruptcy once or twice, and then they do it again, and now they are
booming.
And you ask them during those times where you're at your lowest, when you lost everything, what kept you to think that I can actually do it again?
Yeah.
Then you tried again, then you did it, then you lost it again.
Yeah.
And then suddenly when you came out the third time, you are a master.
Yeah.
Because you get this thing, you understand failure, you've been through these things before, and most of the most successful people, when you hear their stories, they've had some really bad failures, like failures where if you read about their books, you actually think, if it was me, I would have called it quits.
Yeah.
And so it's that moment, that opportunity in that moment where a person says, no, I don't have anything, but what I have here is something that nobody else in this world has.
Sure.
And that's what it is. Very scary.
I can imagine.
But what is not scary in this world that's worth living for,
Look, I mean, there are safer spaces, and I say safer because there's not
but
much
even
that's
corporate
required.
is not safe.
That's true.
I mean, it used to be, but you hear more retrenchment about the private sector now.
Yeah.
Maybe the public sector you're still safe.
Yeah.
You can work in a company and not lose a job. But right now, even in the private sector, jobs are not safe.
They're not.
They're not. They could be a restructure, an acquisition, anything happens, and
Yes.
suddenly people are being cut off.
Yeah.
So it's not as safe as it was before.
And I think we've always thought of it as safe, and it's not necessarily been as safe as we've perceived it to be. Because yes, I know, I mean, times have moved, and we saw in COVID, a lot of people lost their jobs just because of how things changed in the world. But I think in reality, me being in corporate, I see it all the time, even before COVID, where retrenchments were happening. And I was like, this thing of working for someone or being employed by someone and the false sense of security that historically I thought it had, I realized it really was just in my head.
yes.
And I think it's because, I mean, we've seen with our parents back in their days, like my mom was a teacher, for example, like you said,
forever.
public sector, safer. And so I think with our generation, most of us, we are probably the first in our generation to go into proper corporate, like JSC listed companies.
Yes.
And we realize we're not safe either.
No, we're not anymore. I mean, even with banks, people that used to work for banks back in those days, they were safe.
Yes.
But if you look at the volatility in the economy, the geopolitical wars, and we've got a very volatile currency.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of political. I don't even want to say instability, but we've got a political issue, and now even then we used to think politics and businesses they don't mix,
Yes,
but
they
you
far apart.
realize that politics and business
Intertwined.
they're like twins.
Yes.
And whatever happens in politics affects business, and whatever happens in business affects politics.
Absolutely.
And South Africa, I guess if you're in South Africa, we're also heavily reliant on importing a lot of our stuff.
Yeah.
So, and it just, and so anything can happen. Literally tomorrow we can wake up and the news about something.
Yeah.
And people will lose their jobs because of, there could be a owner of a business who would tweet and say something and they lose a contract. And when they lose a contract, the employees lose their job.
Done.
That's how volatile stuff is. So not that one should live in fear, but one should also understand that, you're not invincible to the challenges that could come. And I think this is where, even if one is not an entrepreneur or you are a pure entrepreneur, I think for South African context, having multiple sources of income is something that we need to practice.
Yeah.
We need to also educate children that education is important, but education is not going to, I think before we used to think education is what's going to give you the good job.
Yes.
But we need to educate the people right now to say education should be an opportunity to unlock what you can bring in the table.
Yeah.
The value to create your own income. Because now with highly educated people, they're sitting at home and they can't get jobs. And they got 2-3 degrees. They either told they're highly qualified or they don't have the right qualification.
Yeah.
And so the independent thinking to say, what do I do with my education to create something that will sustain me in my life is what, I think the way forward should be in this world. But not to say I'm going to school so that once I graduate, I'm going to submit my CV and hoping that these companies will hire me. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? You just said something before about fear. I think we're really focusing on fear and the fact that it holds a lot of people back. And earlier in the conversation, you also mentioned being scared.
Yes.
Right? And you've also spoken about the mental health that comes with the mental health challenges that come with being an entrepreneur that are not spoken enough about.
Yes.
I was recently engaging with a friend of mine, and she's just recently ventured into entrepreneurship.
Okay.
From a very well-paying job where she knew it's guaranteed.
Sounds like my past.
And one of the things that she's struggling with right now, she was saying to me that it's almost she's doubting herself in some moments. So it's going well for her business-wise because she's getting projects.
Oh, nice.
And she didn't expect that it would happen at the rate that it's happening at. So it's almost like she's doubting herself and she's feeling like, what if I disappoint the people? They know me. These are people that actually previously when she was in corporate, some of them were agencies that she had worked with. So they know what she's capable of,
Right,
so they
right.
know her track record. But suddenly she's finding herself doubting herself.
Wow.
And she was just sharing with me to say, I don't know, man. There's this thing. I guess for us women also, we like to call it the imposter syndrome.
Yes, I was about to say.
Yeah.
No, the imposter syndrome is actually, I think a lot of us, and when I got into understanding a bit more detail what imposter syndrome is and its sort of pure meaning, I didn't even realize that, it's something that at some point it affected me. So, because, I think one of the things that would even happen is that, like, we win a contract or we hit a milestone, I would struggle to celebrate. I wouldn't celebrate at all because part of me would either feel, I'm not worthy of it,
Yeah.
or I got it by chance, or it's because, I didn't really have experience, because it's all the people that I brought into my team
Yeah.
that actually had more experience. And so you start yourself where you start thinking, well, actually I got this because of them.
Yeah.
But then I do pay them a salary.
Yes.
So that for them to actually do the work,
Yeah.
so, and that could hit you in a lot of spots. In fact, sometimes even in teams, especially when you're starting a business where you're hiring talent and you're hiring people that are able to drive, and sometimes getting people to get the deals for you in the business. And so that even your own team can start making you feel in a way that, well, actually, if it wasn't for them, you'd
be nowhere.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that happens.
Yeah.
Especially when the money starts coming.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, suddenly, there's a change, and your livelihood is actually changing due to these profits and success, and obviously, the business starting to, cash flow growing. And it can play out in very different scenarios. It can play out internally within yourself. It can play out within your team. It can play out externally, especially with Black businesses, and sometimes, being a supplier to large companies. There's also that to say, well, you are here because of BE. If you weren't Black, you probably wouldn't get this project. And so there's a lot, and I can imagine being a woman, where that could play out to think, actually, I don't deserve this.
Yeah.
Or, I actually got it because of this.
Yeah.
So, and you put yourself right at the back to say, I'm actually not really the person. It was just all of that. And so, it's so dangerous, and it also played against me a lot of time. And I think that she really needs to find a place to, everything is happening because she was the brainchild.
Yeah.
And she must remember that the reason why they are doing business with her, whatever, is because of her. And I think along the way we forget that this is happening because of us. And she has to, and sometimes even going to therapy. But if you don't take care of it, it can be a very dangerous place. And it can really work against you, where your confidence and as a business, and your confidence is everything. And when your confidence starts diminishing, people can pick up that energy, and and even in your negotiations, and sometimes you negotiate bad deals because you think, and I've done it, and I'm saying this because where I just felt like, you know what, I don't deserve this, and so you just take anything. And so you really need to be like, I deserve this. This is what I should get. This is my pricing. And you either take it or leave it.
Yeah.
And I'm not, why is my pricing like this? Because the product or the service I'm providing has so much value.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, and that's what has happened now. I have been saying no now. Some of the, it's now I'm actually confident enough to say no, thank you to a project.
Sure.
And someone else will be like, why don't you take it? I was like, no, I don't just take anything right now, because I know what it will take. Yes, I used to just take anything because it was sort of a handout, and I felt, okay, well, let me take what I can. But now it's like, no, because I understand my worth and my value, and I know that I do bring a lot to the table.
Wow.
So yeah, it takes time, but she has to overcome that, because the business needs her to be,
at her best.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think those are such powerful words. I will definitely share those with her. She'll be watching this episode.
Hopefully.
She will. She has no choice. Just in closing, because we
Yeah.
don't have much time left.
Sure.
Just on the lighter side of things, right? So you're an entrepreneur and you've got this vision for your life. What are some of the ways that you, I guess, get to relax and
Yes.
just recharge? What are some of
Yes.
those things that you do?
One of the, I suppose the most important thing which I didn't mention in terms of driving me to do what I do is my family. My family is such key. My wife, my son. My wife at times, especially when I just don't feel like doing this, and she'll just say things to me and just be like the biggest cheerleader, and sometimes we're believing in me when I don't believe in myself. Where I'm just like, oh man, I've been trying this over and over and it's just not coming together. And I think COVID period was obviously a very challenging time with a lot of things changed. And, as an entrepreneur, you had to pivot and try and find different ways of sustaining yourself because it was locked down and all of that. So, so I think having that team and my wife and my son is so important. And if you're not married or your partner, but it's always important to have that person, those people that really believe in you, and it actually makes such a difference. And so my time to relax is that spending time with my wife. We next week we actually competing in this fitness challenge, High Rocks.
Okay. What does it entail?
It is it's sort of like a high intensity running, burpees, rowing, and there's a lot of and so us getting involved in those activities, playing golf. I'm starting to enjoy golf now.
Nice.
Traveling, and just traveling, reading books. I'm an avid reader.
Okay.
In fact, I'm reading a book now on ESCOM conveniently. Now
You brought back the load shedding.
And reading and all of that. So to try and do things that are, and also just spirituality. I'm a very spiritual person, or I'd like to think I am. Praying, meditating, and just drawing that strength from a higher power. It doesn't matter what religion you are, but drawing inspiration from a higher power to keep you grounded and all of these things. And so those are the things that right now I wish I could be doing more to relax, but I'm not. But I think traveling is one of the things that I enjoy, and just going other parts of the world and just seeing how people are doing things is really nice. I enjoy that.
Amazing to hear that you've got such a wholesome life. You've got a family as well.
Yes.
Because sometimes I think we are under the illusion that if you want to really achieve great things, so those billions that you're speaking about, you must go hard all the time. Oof. And yes, we understand that there is a sacrifice that comes with building anything or succeeding at anything. But it's important, again, to find those pockets or spaces to be able to just unwind. So thank you for
when you're building
that.
it for who?
Exactly. You won't be
you're
there.
All alone and you are sick and you die, So there has to be a balance. Like, who am I doing this for?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dumi, thank you so much for making time
so much,
this afternoon to come and chat to us. I really enjoyed our conversation. I look forward to having you again in future to come and hear some of the developments that the Zenzele group has undergone. But wishing you all the best, and even with your family, upwards and onwards all the way.
Thank you very much. And all the best with the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies and gents, for joining us today on this episode while we spoke to Tumi Phake. I hope you were able to take a nugget or two, especially on his journey as an entrepreneur. Looking forward to hosting you for more sessions. Ciao, ciao.